Welcome. Where? South Africa. Inda, Dumoulin, Molo, Sowabrona, Hugandet, and a warm welcome to the Indufo Knowledge Cast, the podcast where your curiosity meets insightful conversations. We're diving deep into auctions and negotiation today, exploring those high-stakes bids and clever deals, and we're using game theory, a very short introduction, to uncover those hidden rules.
It's fascinating how these concepts are everywhere, even just trying to get a good price at a market here in Josie, or negotiating rent with your landlord even. Like, having some game theory knowledge can really give you an advantage, I think.
Okay, let's unpack that. And I guess auctions are a good place to start. And I think most of us, when we think about auctions, we picture those big events at Sotheby's, with people in suits bidding millions.
Yeah.
But for this deep dive, we're starting with a much older story, one that many of us probably remember from Sunday school even. King Solomon and the two mothers claiming the same baby.
Oh, that's interesting you say that. I mean, it really shows how important incentives are when people are making decisions, right? And that's a huge part of game theory. You see, Solomon's solution, I mean, it was dramatic and everything, but it wouldn't have worked on a mother who thought strategically, right?
Okay.
So the mother who was willing to give up the baby to save it was actually the real mother. She was acting emotionally right. But if she knew the rules of the game, she might have realized that seeming indifferent would have meant she won, even if it meant acting like she didn't care, which goes against every instinct, right?
So are you saying that Solomon's method didn't guarantee the truth would come out? Like, he could have given the baby to the wrong mother. That's a pretty big mistake for, someone who's supposed to be the wisest man ever.
Exactly. And this is why choosing the right game is so important, especially with something as important as an auction. And speaking of auctions, did you know there are actually many different types of auctions? Each one is kind of unique, like our different neighborhoods here in South Africa, right?
Oh, tell me more. Because I have to say, I only ever picture that classic auctioneer rattling off numbers,
Yeah. So that's your classic English auction, the one where people keep bidding back and forth, and then it ends with everyone kind of holding their breath, right?
Yeah.
It's perfect for things that are really one of a kind, like a special piece of art, or maybe even a vintage Springbok rugby jersey, anything that collectors are passionate about.
Yeah. You can see that. It really creates this feeling of urgency, like, I have to have it now.
Yeah. But then you've got the Dutch auction, which is like our fast-paced taxi ranks. The price starts super high, and then it drops until somebody just grabs it. It's all about speed. And it works really well for things like fresh produce, like at a market in Durban, or those end-of-day sales at a bakery,
So different approaches work best in different situations. But it kind of makes you wonder, how do bidders decide what their strategy is going to be? Is there a way to know what someone else is thinking?
You've hit on a really important point there. Information, or rather not having enough information, is key in any kind of strategy. Take the Vickery auction, for example.
Okay.
It might sound a bit strange at first, but the way it works actually makes people want to be honest, because the winner ends up paying the second highest bid.
Wait, so how does that work? Wouldn't people just bid super low, hoping to get a steal?
You'd think so, right? But here's the thing. In a Vickery auction, you actually do better if you bid what you think it's really worth. Imagine you're at an auction for, let's say, a vintage radio, and you're willing to pay around $1,000 for it, but you bid R800 hoping to get a bargain.
Right.
If somebody else bids R900, you're out. You lose.
Oh, I see. So because I tried to get a lower price, I missed out.
You got it. But if you bid your maximum, you would have either won at R900 or somebody would have to bid even higher to get it. It's like those taxi fare negotiations. Sometimes the best thing to do is just be upfront about what you're willing to pay.
Right. Okay, I think I'm starting to see the logic in that. But what about that feeling you get, that buyer's remorse? Like, you get caught up in the excitement, you win, and then you're like, wait a minute, did I pay way too much?
You're talking about the winner's curse. It's a classic example of how not having enough information can really trip you up. Think about buying a house you haven't seen in a competitive market like Cape Town. You're excited, you want to win, so you outbid everybody, and then you discover there are all these hidden problems after you've signed everything.
Right.
It's all about something called information asymmetry. That's just a fancy way of saying there's a gap between what you know and what the other bidders might know.
And that was just auctions. We're moving on to negotiation now, which feels even more like, a game where knowing more gives you the upper hand.
Definitely. You can think of it like a chess match. Every move you make depends on what you think your opponent will do next. And knowing how much they know is a big part of that.
Speaking of chess, one thing I've always found strange about game theory is how it assumes everyone will cooperate. Like in those classic models, people just magically agree and split everything perfectly, right?
Yeah.
But real life is way more complicated.
You're right. It's definitely not that straightforward. A lot of the theory depends on this idea of a black box of cooperation. But I mean, the real world runs on trust and reputation, all those unwritten rules we have, right? Think about how those informal lending circles work here, the Stockvilles. You wouldn't lend money to someone if you knew they didn't pay people back, would you?
Definitely not. Makes you think twice about gossiping about, missing a payment. It's all about that social agreement we have.
Exactly. Trust and reputation, they're what make those agreements work. If you don't have that, then you're stuck in the cycle of not trusting each other and you miss out on opportunities, right? Imagine trying to, navigate traffic in Joburg during rush hour, but nobody's following any rules.
So let's say we've got the trust part figured out and everyone's playing fair. How do we decide who gets what? Like, how do you make sure things are split fairly, especially if you don't even know what's really important to the other person? It's like, how do you trade, like, the Coke sister for a bunny chow? Where do you even start?
Now, that's when it gets really interesting. There's this really cool solution in game theory called the Nash bargaining solution. Imagine you and a friend are splitting a really nice mango, right? Maybe you really want the flesh, but your friend loves that sweet and tangy juice.
Right.
The Nash bargaining solution says you'll divide it so that you both get more out of the deal than if you didn't agree at all. You're trying to find a win-win, even if you want different things.
So it's not about just cutting things in half. It's about figuring out what each person values and finding that point where everyone feels like they're getting a good deal. I mean, that feels relevant to pretty much every interaction we ever have.
Right. And it shows you just how crucial information is when you're negotiating anything. Let's say you're trying to buy a used car, which is something pretty much everyone in South Africa does at some point, right? If you know the seller needs to get rid of the car quickly, you're in a much better position to make a deal, right?
Oh, for sure. Information really is power, like they say. But how do you actually use that information without, resorting to playing dirty?
It's a balancing act, that's for sure. You don't want to reveal all your secrets, right? But dropping little hints or signals can tip the scales in your favor. It's a bit like that traditional Indalamo dance. You're showing off your strengths and trying to impress the other person without giving away your whole game plan.
So it's not just what you say, but how you say it, right? It's about your body language, how your voice sounds, even those little pauses for dramatic effect.
Exactly. It's all about sending the right signals, even if you're not saying everything directly. That's where costly signaling comes into play. It basically means doing things that are hard or expensive to fake to show the other person you're serious. Think of a Springbok player doing that strongman gesture after they score a try. It's a way of saying, I'm powerful, but it wouldn't mean much if they weren't actually a good player.
Right.
Yeah.
So are you saying that it's sometimes worth going the extra mile, putting in that extra effort, just to show how committed or how skilled you are?
Exactly. It's about building that credibility and trust, even if it costs you something.
Talking about unwritten rules and signals, it makes me think about all those social conventions we follow without even realizing it. Like here in South Africa, braaiing on a Tuesday, that's basically law, right?
Yeah.
But where did those conventions even come from? It's not like we all had a meeting and agreed, okay, everyone, Tuesdays are for braai, write that down.
I know. That's what's so cool about them. They just kind of pop up on their own through trying things out and seeing what sticks. Like, think about driving on the left side of the road here in South Africa. It's just something we do. But imagine if people suddenly decided to switch sides.
And don't even get me started on those robots that aren't actually robots.
I know, right? Those conventions help us avoid those crazy situations, even if nobody wrote them down. They're like those unspoken rules you have in, a casual soccer game with friends. Everyone just knows how to play, even without a ref.
It's like we've been playing this game of life for so long that we've come up with these unwritten rules to keep things running smoothly.
Yeah. And the fascinating thing is, once a convention sticks around for a while, it becomes even stronger. If everyone's standing in line nicely, you're not going to cut in line, right? You'd stick out, and people might even get upset with you.
Yeah, it's like those unspoken dress codes. You don't want to be the only one at a braai wearing a suit.
Exactly. Conventions might seem simple at first, but they really do shape how we act and what we expect from each other. It would be total chaos, like trying to drive through a four-way stop when nobody knows who's supposed to go first.
So how do these conventions even start? It's not like we all got together and decided Right, Tuesdays are for Bri. Make a note of it.
That's the thing. They kind of just happen naturally. Like people try things out, see what works, Think about us driving on the left side of the road here in South Africa. It's just what we do. But imagine if people just, I don't know, randomly decided to switch sides one day.
Oh gosh, don't even remind me about those robots that aren't really robots.
Exactly. Conventions, those unspoken rules, they help us avoid those situations where everything goes haywire, even though no one actually wrote them down. It's like when you're playing a casual game of soccer with your friends, no referee, but everyone just seems to know how to play?
Yeah, it's like we've been playing this game of life for so long that we've figured out these unwritten rules to make sure things run smoothly.
Right. And the really cool thing is that when a convention has been around for a while, it becomes even more powerful. So, for example, if you see everyone standing in line politely, you're less likely to push your way to the front,
Huh.
right? You would stand out, and people might even get upset.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's like those unspoken dress codes we have. You don't want to be the only one showing up to a Bri all dressed up in a suit.
Yeah, exactly. Conventions, they might seem simple on the surface, but they have a huge impact on how we behave and what we expect from each other.
So from ancient stories about King Solomon to the busy streets of Josie, it seems like we can find game theory everywhere.
It really is everywhere, yeah.
Whether you're trying to get a great deal at a market or navigating those unwritten Bri rules, knowing about these hidden games can totally change your perspective.
It's all about understanding the incentives,
Yeah.
right? Like what motivates people, the power of information, and those subtle cues that affect our choices.
It's like you've given us this whole new way of seeing the world.
And the best part is it makes you think ahead, you know? Try to anticipate what the other person might do, and then hopefully you can find those solutions where everybody wins.
So, next time you're at a market trying to get a good price, remember those game theory tips. You might just outsmart that experienced trader and get yourself a bargain.
Or even better, maybe you can figure out a way where you both benefit, build some trust, and maybe even have a laugh together.
That's all we have for you on this episode of Indubo Knowledge Cast. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those conversations flowing. Salakala.